Hello and welcome to another church tour with me, Church Tour, aka Steeple for the People. I know what you're thinking coming into this video. This is a half hour long, you've seen that in the bottom corner, and this guy doesn't have adverts, so there's no break. But I can tell you that this church has some of the best stained glass I think we've seen yet. It's worth waiting for that. And that's in the second half of the video, so once you get that far you might as well stick around for the rest. See what happens from the end of the story. But there's a lot to get through, there's a lot to see. And when there's nothing to say, we'll just have a look at stuff, you know. Here we go. We start with a porch. It's a 15th century porch according to my book. And there's a few things going on. You've got a pointed arch there. Looks like it's been renovated, covered with new stuff. And there's some new designs on the columns there at the top. There's brick at the top too, so that'll be probably a Victorian addition. And then there's this sundial. So it says there it's about 1:30. I looked back at my phone and I've filmed this at about 3:15, so it's a little bit off, and I don't think it accounts for BST or GMT or whatever it is. But it's close enough. Little king. It looks like Lord Farquaad, except with a beard. Little queen. I don't know. Maybe princess. And then we go through. Looks to be a relatively modern door, another pointed archway. And this whole thing's been plastered white, so it's nice and bright. And then we have this. Piscina at the top with a design in it, and a really quite kitsch mother of Jesus. Mary. Also, I thought that iron thing around the door was a bit weird. It's an interesting little feature. But according to my book, this porch back in the 19th century, it was used for sleeping for homeless labourers, and it was used for threshing corn. So that's one of the cool things I think about these old churches, is that, you know, there are community hubs, a lot of history that's happened in this place. And we see that when we get in, actually, because there's a lot going on. So there's a door. Hang on a sec, we need to listen to this because it's a good click. See, told you. And in this door, it's not like the other ones we usually see. It's a bit more modern. I don't know when it's from, but it's not medieval. Which actually links to a lot of the stuff in this church. My big orange book complains that there's not much of interest because it's all been so heavily renovated. But I mean, I don't know when that was written, but it's a pretty old book, so for him it would have been modern history. But for me, it's part of what I like about this stuff. It's got a lot of Victorian elements. So this here, there's a little vestry with some nice wood carvings on it. Apparently it incorporates some of the original rood screen. The rood screen would have separated the nave, which is the big bit we're looking at now, and the chancel at the end. They used it to separate the dirty peasant common folk from the holy stuff. But look at this. We're quite lucky actually, because it's a colourful church. They like their colours back in the Victorian days. So it was a nice sunny day too, so you got all the colourful cushions, you got the colourful windows. You got the nice deep rich wood of those new pews. And here we go, this is a little teaser. This is a real highlight, that stained glass I was talking about, but you can't see it properly here, so you need to stay tuned in for that. And also, as we're walking past, just note these columns. Some are circular, some are hexagonal or octagonal, because they're quite interesting compared to the other ones, which are a different shape and size. Okay, so this is a sneak peek. You shouldn't be looking at this stained glass. Here's some other stained glass which we don't look at later, so you can fill your eyes with this one. And this is a nice little shrine to Mary. You see there's some interesting details there. And obviously there's a Ukrainian flag, so people can send their prayers over that way. But back in the day, there's a chance that this would have been a completely separate area, separated with wood, but they opened it up in the Victorian days. This would have been a little separate chapel for someone, maybe. There's a nice piscina here. Look at that. Old construction is just completely uneven, with a little triple-sided, triple-screened angels of the whatever thing. And I like these sort of Eastern style Marys. More Greek Orthodox or something. And annoyingly, we didn't actually get a proper look at that stained glass up there, I don't think. I hope we come to that later. Thought I'd have a little sneaky look in this box. It promised candles and it gave candles. This is really good, I thought. There's another thing that's to note about this church is its quality haberdashery. So that's just one brilliant pattern you see on a cushion. And there's plenty more of that to come as well as the quality stained glass. This, I'm guessing, is original paneling with some interesting flowery designs in. My books note that the pews were all restored with an impression of the previous ones, so these are just decent versions of what they would have looked like. They've been renovated. Well, recreated actually. They're from 1856. And when we look around the other side, it's interesting to note the different types of window tracery you get in, which I always get wrong. So there's some kind of plate tracery with some trefoils and circles. That's more your sort of, perpendicular, just reticulated, some leafy styling. And then, yeah, this is slightly more advanced, kind of circular, reticulated. And here we go, my favourite thing, the floor. It's a classic red and black checkerboard style we always see in these Victorian renovations. But of course, like the rest of the church, there's different layers to it, so when we get further on, we'll see there's some more interesting floor. And that's just one more reason to stick around for the whole half hour. Okay, so, this I looked up. Francis Deere, couldn't find him on the internet. John Knivet did exist on the internet, he's from the Knivet family. But I don't think they did that much interesting, really. They had lands in East Anglia and dealings with royalty. The kind of stuff that gets you a stone in the church and a bit of money, but don't know. Couldn't find anything about that guy either. This is a nice little view, looking westward. And then this guy again, I looked him up. Captain Keyes is apparently a character from Halo, so when I searched the name, I didn't get anything useful. It was just a bunch of like Reddit posts about aliens and shooting and stuff. But St Andrew's, Holborn, that's a nice church to visit. Designed by Christopher Wren, but completely smashed in the war. Oh, quickly, we're looking here, look, you can see the different sides of the church have different columns. The two different aisles, you've got those chunky ones on the left hand side and the perpendicular straight line ones on the right hand side. Yeah, so St Andrew's in Holborn, worth a visit, a nice Wren church. And yeah, destroyed by the war, so it's just completely, it looks like Chris Jenner's house inside has been completely done up. There's a quick look there at the roof. I think we have a look at that again later. But it's a single hammer beam construction. The hammer beams are recumbent with headless figures on. And collar and arch brace construction. And it says here, the purlins and ridge are nicely carved with the ragged staff. I don't know what that means. Oh, the font is good, look at this. It says 13th century. So, I mean, that's the 1200s. Proper old. But then this thing here obviously is a bit more modern. A tabernacle. It's nice elaborate wood carving which matches the rest of the church. And then we just carry on. I think there's another view of the floor coming up. Yeah, there we go. Interesting things to see. I think the reason I like this was that it showed the way people have walked over the tiles. The ones on the left and the right are barely touched, and the ones that are nice and smooth in the centre from people's footsteps. This archway here, he's got, as we'll see later, it's got a similar style to the arches on the northern side of the church, which is the right-hand side, as the from the perspective we were just looking at. And here's some nice stained glass, which I'm afraid you can't really see properly because I don't have a good camera. But it's a scene of the baptism of Christ. You've got John the Baptist on the right, Jesus. I really like the water effect around his feet. So if you can maybe have a look for yourselves or just wind back and sort of zoom in. It's really well done. It's by a group of guys who did stained glass in the mid-1800s called Heaton, Butler and Bain. This table of benefactions dates back to 1492, but actually it was made in the 1858 apparently. Nice little kitchen area, serve a few cakes, wash a few teacups, boil a kettle. Then there's this play area in the corner. I like that rug. I think that would really go well in a sort of cutesy home. Again, a fine example of the quality haberdashery we've got going on in this church. They really care about their fabrics around here, and it shows. There's quite a few interesting things to look at. Red elephant wearing a nappy. Standard quality teddy bear. I think there was this hyena I found on the floor. There we go, there's an organ. Those designs on the pipes are nice, but again, I just don't know anything about organs. But while that's going on, it's a good chance to talk about the Bunbury family, who were like the local lords of the manor in Great Barton from the 1600s to the early 1900s. I've had a look on Wikipedia and it seems it didn't really do too much, other than just like the standard aristocrat things like owning land and dying without children. And they show up later in the church because they were big benefactors, I think, for the church, so they got their name all over the place. They worked in politics and they represented the local area. And then there's this guy, Lieutenant Henry Edward Bunbury, who pops up later, and he's interesting because he worked in the government and he had to tell Napoleon, who was captive on a British ship called the Bellerophon, which is named after a Greek hero who slayed monsters and captured their horse Pegasus. He had to tell Napoleon that he couldn't live in England, but he'd be exiled to St. Helena, which is a really, really remote island in the South Atlantic, like near Africa. And then I saw this piano. This is good. Listen up. Actually, it's not. It's terrible. Yeah, that was really bad. I can do better, I promise. But I didn't know what to do, so I just did a 1-4-5 progression in A minor. And then here we go, looking down the chancel, the beautiful view of that stained glass, lit up by the sunlight. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, there's a curtain behind that piano. And it leads to like this scary nook with a big old staircase, and I swear I heard some breathing and movement shuffling around behind it, so I wanted to go and have a look, but one, the piano's too heavy and it won't move, and two, it was scary. Okay, so this is that guy, Henry, who had to tell Napoleon he wasn't going back to England. Had to live on sort of like a desert island instead. Well, it's not desert, it's a volcanic island. But either way, I don't think Napoleon would have been happy about it. It's really well executed, look at that. It's Victorian Gothic. Matches the rest of the church. And again, quality seat coverings. So we've got that funky rug, we got that psychedelic one, we got this carpet now as well. You know, people complain about the renovations sort of crushing the medieval history and the local history, but they always replace it with something interesting. Now this stained glass here is an interesting one because those two Jesuses are on the wrong side. The one on the left with the banner, that's after the resurrection when he comes out of the tomb. And it should be on the right above the soldiers, or those guards, who were supposed to be sleeping. They're mentioned apparently in the Matthew Gospel. Because his tomb was meant to be guarded, and they were like, well, how did he get out when they had guards? And there's they're asleep. So that explains that one. It's the wrong way around for some reason. Some more Bunburys. A lot of Bunburys around this place. That's a really old looking window there. 13th century, this chancel. Same age as the font. 800 years old it's been standing. I sort of thought this was funny. That's some guy's tombstone. A big one, and they just put chairs over it. I had a look under the rug. Underlay, standard. Then we have a look at another door. It looks pretty similar in construction to the entrance door. Modern construction, reinforced, double reinforced, and sort of it looks a bit like a boat, but it's not medieval. And then here we go, look, the real fans that have already noticed it. We've got some more floor coming up. White and black checkerboard style. All sorts of interesting tiles around the altar. This one's good, little blue star. And I thought this one here and then some flowery ones which we're about to see on the other side. They look almost like 70s style. And I'm not talking 1870s, I mean 1970s. Like those white flowers, you put those on your psychedelic hippie wood panelled room and things. Like next to your record player with some flares and a space hopper. That memorial there on the left is quite interesting, but unfortunately I don't think I filmed it. It's a really interesting design with a branch and a tree. You can pause. Oh, I did film it, so you can pause and have a bit of a look. Oh, I really did film it. That's Louisa Amelia, who's another Bunbury, and it was done by a proper sculptor called Thomas Milnes. Good view here, all the way down, looking westward. And then we jump around. Deep green, Victorian colour on the altar. And a lovely bit of stained glass. So this isn't the best stained glass. That's yet to come, but it's still some very good stained glass. So it's Jesus just preaching stuff. You can, I think the top third is really interesting with the deep red and all those white floral patterns and almost tropical trees in the background. You really get some sort of arts and crafts vibes. It's a good time now actually to talk about the church name. It's called Holy Innocents, which is named after the slaughter of the innocents, which I think comes up later on. And this slogan here, it says, "Suffer the children to come unto me," which basically means Jesus saying, "Teach them about me." Not quite sure what this one is. Looks to be filling up those jugs with wine, so it could be like the feeding of the 5,000, but there's no fish there. But anyway, the killing of the innocents, that's when King Herod heard that there was a new infant boy coming to replace him as the new king. So he decided to slaughter all the young boys around the place. Don't really know what to say about that. And then here we have one more example of the quality fabrics in the place. Another paisley design. That I don't think the label at the top, I don't think that was actually explaining what was going on. It just had a bunch of religious stuff on it. But it's just a really nice table covering for that chest of drawers or the cupboard beneath. And I think this is the celebrated stained glass. And this shows what I was talking about earlier. You've got the nativity, the ascension, and then the resurrection coming out the tomb. And it almost mirrors one on the other side, but this time it's actually the right way around. Look, you got the disciples at the bottom, and then you got him coming out of the tomb with the banner and those sleeping guards on the right hand side. That makes sense, doesn't it? And I don't know why he's got a banner or what that was all about, but I had to look it up, and apparently it was the case. He had some banner with a flag on it in the tomb. That stuff at the bottom is about the Dentons, who apparently are buried in the churchyard nearby. You can just see that sort of classical pre-raphaelite style with the deep Victorian colours, the ruby red and the heavy green and the deep purple. You can't escape it. And then this one here on the far right side, the eastern side, this is a composition by Morris and Co, who were heavily involved in the arts and craft movement in the Victorian time. Actually, I guess they sort of basically invented it. And this one is by Sir Edward Burne-Jones. He was a big figure at the time and did paintings like this one and this one and this one. I mean, they're not famous paintings, but you can see the style. and the colours. But they are sort of peculiar. You've got the centurion as faith, that's fides, on the left. Good Samaritan as charity, caritas. And then Joshua, I don't know what he did, as hope, which is spes. And you can really see the arts and crafts style. Look at that right at the top with all the greenery, flowers and fruits. And it's just the facial style too. Sort of every single one of them's got a stiff upper lip, but they're into some weird stuff if you press them. And then this is really the crowning glory. A tribute to Queen Victoria, with the Queen of Sheba and Queen Esther on either side, who are weird to have in a church because they feature more heavily in the Hebrew Bible. But I think they just needed some queens, and you don't really get too many. So there's Queen Victoria looking nice and Victorian, as she does. And that slogan on the right hand side saying, "If I perish, I perish. If I perish, I perish." Which reminds me that the sundial we saw at the start said "perient e imputantur," which means they perish and are judged. But look at the detail with these lilies there in the corner, and the royal coat of arms too, with the cowardly-looking lion. They just didn't know how to paint lions in those days. So he doesn't really look scary at all. So now we're walking down the aisle, looking northwards, northerly look. A great look at the windows, the interesting tracery, and also the different types of columns that I was talking about. As you can see on this side, they're much lighter, thinner, perpendicular style, which shows that they were probably built after the chunkier ones on the other side. Some more time looking at the roof at those, recumbered figures who were all headless. It's zoomed in a bit so you can sort of get an image of what they might have looked like with their heads, or if you were just closer and can actually see them properly. See, there's those pillars there, chunky. And they're these ones, which are probably actually similar in size, but they just look a lot lighter because they've got a bit more cut away. Pointed archway. Very simple sort of chandeliers. Back in the day, they would have had candles on them probably. And they've got bulbs. And I think it looks as if they've just incorporated fragments into these windows, because it doesn't look like it's original stained glass, like it's meant to be there, or rather, I guess it could be original stained glass, but they've taken most of it out and sort of stuck a bit in. It's another memorial to the guys that died in the war. So respect to the boys. A couple of brothers there by the looks of it, that's sad. There's some more on this side. Brian, kinda nice. Yeah, he's kinda nice. Again, see, you get a better look here at the fragments of stained glass. Don't know what's happened there. Because it looks like they did it at the same time as doing the whole Queen Victoria thing, because they've got the ER there. Or maybe they just didn't have the budget for more glass. Because I doubt that Morrison Co. came cheap. Proper designs by proper artists. There's a big curtain here covering this door. Again, modern construction. Looks as if all the doors are built and bought at the same time. Nice doorway. With a angular arch rather than the pointed, rounded ones we've seen elsewhere. And a helpful sign showing you where the toilet is. But as you'll see, this door just leads outside, so I think it basically means just go in the way God intended. A lot of security on this door. And fair enough, because you've got a lot of stuff to protect in this church. So I had to mess around with a bunch of locks. We got there in the end, and then once it's open, once I worked out, there's like 20 different locks on it. Here we go. I swear I did that one twice. And we're out. a huge graveyard. So I didn't actually spend any time filming the graveyard just because I thought I got enough footage just looking at that stained glass. But it's definitely worth a look because there's hundreds of years of graves in there. And here we are. We've walked around to the tower. There's, again, like the inside, there's a lot going on in this outside. There's some weird random brick additions there around the porch. And there's a big tall tower with uneven buttresses, so I'm guessing that might have been reinforced at some point. There's some beautiful flush work up top. I mean, your tower's tall, everyone can see it, so you want to make it look its best up top. And also a really interesting little window for the bell holes. I don't know what the proper name is. And just take some time to really scan the thing for all the different types of flint work and flush work. There's some brick and flint stuff there, that little chimney or whatever that is. There's a gargoyle with a big old gutter sticking out his mouth. A normal gutter. Some sort of little safe hole. There we go, we're about to scan our way up the tower. Firstly, you need to look at the flush work, the checkerboard stuff down there at the baseline. And we can look at the tower, look at the size of the thing with that big Suffolk sky behind it. Big chunky buttresses, you need that to hold it up. And another door, which we didn't look at, and I didn't actually get to see in that side, because it was locked, we couldn't get through. So I don't know what's underneath the tower, but I'm guessing it'll be a super interesting utility room. So it's a shame to miss out, because they usually got some good relics in there, like old boxes of celebrations and tea bags. So here on the aisle on the outside, there's a really extensive, and much more extensive than you usually see, an extensive checkerboard pattern in the flush work. And above there in the clerestory you can see around the windows on the upper layer, they've got some checkerboard, white and black sort of alternating flint and brick. I'll zoom in a bit there so we can have a look. Again, you've got the gargoyles up top, spitting into the gutters, all the evil spirits coming out of their mouth. And here we can get a proper look at the tracery on the windows. So it's not actually that impressive from the inside, but here on the out it's circular plate tracery. It looks quite good. And here you can see the chancel, the smaller bit, the older bit from the 13th century. The windows are smaller, they're much more basic, because they didn't know what they were doing quite so well back in those days. And this, once I saw this, I had to go back inside, because that's the little area and the staircase behind the piano. But you just can't get in. I was hoping to climb up it, even if it has got a scary monster in it, but you just can't get up because it's blocked by the piano. And now we're on the eastern side looking at the chancel. Interesting things to note are the circular tracery there in the windows, and the rare and slightly different buttresses. I mean, they're hexagonal and they're really, really chunky. With, hang on a minute, I wrote down what they're called. On the top of the buttresses, they're called gables. They look like ice cream cones. A couple of headstops there at the end of the archway. They've been smashed up, either by time or just people who are angry about whatever, Reformation, Civil Wars, standard stuff. And there we can see a 13th century tomb which was built into the chancel. I couldn't find out who for or why, but it's usually someone who's donated a bunch of money because they've been sinning their whole life. And then when they get worried about dying and going to hell, they're like, you know what, I'll pay to build a church and stick my body in it. And if God's not good with that, then there's nothing you can do. And this is quite interesting. This is the window we were looking at where the guys were the wrong way around. Jesus was on the wrong side. They've bricked up a little bit in the top left corner, you can see. And that tomb I was looking at, I just thought it was interesting because they'd sort of taped it up. I don't know if that keeps the spirits in, but it was heavily cracked, so if there are any spirits coming out, then they went a long time ago. So there it is. Half an hour later, we're all done. Absolutely beautiful church with a lot going on in Great Barton. Oh yeah, I didn't say that, did I? Yeah, it's in Great Barton. It's really far out. There's not much going on in Great Barton, and it's kind of like, if that's Great Barton, then I wonder what Barton's like, because Great Barton is just a pub, a road, petrol station, but a really good church.